Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Buzz Trivia here, joined by Thomas. And today we are talking about Maxxxine, which is the latest film by Ty West, the completion of the Pearl, Mia Goth, Maxxxine
Yeah, you
X
know the one. You know
trilogy.
the one.
That one, the trilogy. And it was interesting. So I would say that we're both mixed positive on the first two films overall. I think X.
I'd
We
say
both.
mixed negative on X. I would say mixed negative
Yeah,
on
I
X.
think X is decent. I'm a bit more positive than you on it.
Yeah,
It definitely has some issues, but it's fun for what it is, I think. Pearl, I do think it's a
yeah.
good film.
I think it's got issues, but fundamentally, I think Mia Goth's performance really does carry that one.
Yeah, no, Mia Goth turns in a best of the year type performance in that film,
Yeah,
and really elevates it above, what is for the most part just a fairly standard atmospheric piece.
yeah.
And then we get to this one. So I was relatively excited about it, especially coming off of Pearl and Pearl being, I think, quite good overall, and was hoping that we could wrap up this trilogy in a nice way. And we have this glitzy 80s, sexy slasher aesthetic, and it just feels entirely plastic and lifeless, this entire film.
Yeah, no, I'd completely echo all of that statement. I mean, it's so desperate for an aesthetic. It's so it does everything in not to aid the film, not to aid the narrative anyway. It all just feels like window dressing, and
Yep.
I think really this film has some fundamental problems at its core. I mentioned this to you off camera. Like, I'd love to see Ty West direct something else, but I'd rather it not be something that he writes. I think it is the way. I think the direction is.
And we need to free
Okay.
Mia Goth from the series as well. Apparently, they're making another one, but
Yeah.
let her do some other shit.
I think the direction for the most part is okay. I think Mia Goth's performance is a definite step down from even X, like definitely Pearl, but even X.
Yeah.
But like, she's fine for the most part. I think she does work in the role still. But I think narratively, this film really does run into some roadblocks, really meanders quite aimlessly towards a very lackluster conclusion, which is unfortunate because that is supposedly the conclusion for this whole franchise. I just don't think it pulls any of its disparate ideas together in a satisfying way at all, really. And so it just comes across as a very disappointing, very mild, very watered down sort of film with really nothing to it.
Yeah. I mean, Ty West truly aesthetic, too close to the sun. You mentioned window dressing, and it is just it's just nothing. Like it's trying to pull in all of these ideas and references to 80s horror and even horror before that, right? We have like the Norman Bates Hotel, and it's like it feels almost like it has prequel energy, where it's just pointing at like, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this thing that you remember. And it does that as well through these flashbacks that are supposed to represent like her trauma from X, and we keep on flashing back to them like when she's getting her head covered with the goo or whatever, and it just amounts to absolutely nothing other than I guess maybe trying to make us sympathize with her as a character, or be like, oh, she's crazy, she's gonna snap at some point, and it kind of loading this Chekhov's gun that never explodes, but also never has the tension to make us, feel like that was warranted. And again, it feels like a sequel that's very regressive and very
Yeah.
like reliant on the other films while also not building anything on top of them.
No, and I think everything that is built on top of it comes across as disjointed and fairly underserved,
Yeah.
unnecessary, superfluous. Like, they bring in police officer characters, and to get in spoilers, already spoiler warning, some people
Spoiler.
maybe not, it'll be in the title probably.
Yeah.
But they don't seem that important, and then when we get to the climax, they're suddenly very important.
Right. And that
And
can be done
ideas
well if
that,
there's misdirection, but
yeah.
there's absolutely no misdirection. Like it's just pulling random pieces together by the end. And certain characters are significantly overused. Like, I mean, like Elizabeth Debicki is just kind of randomly there, and she'll just like say some words about art that is supposed to connect to like this, the playing off the 80s rebellion against like metal music and horror films,
Yeah.
and trying to be Puritan, which then kind of connects to the ending if you do some mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
But then, like, I don't know, it feels like he wanted to make 3 or 4 different films and tried to shove them all together, and the entire project just feels like a bit of an identity crisis, where it really does not understand what it wants to be, but is so desperately trying to cling on to these ideas and elevate its themes and ideas into something that are making this meaningful commentary about like art and religion and sexuality, and it just all like it's hollow. Like there's absolutely nothing
Exactly.
there.
Yeah. In the same way that you mentioned like the Norman Bates Motel stuff, it just felt like you're pointing at something and going, look at this. I feel like that is the same way Ty West handled the themes in this work. It was just
Yeah.
like pointing stuff out. And then yes, there is sort of a
Like
through line. Like I can see
religion and
how
horror,
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, I can see how they did end up at the climax that they did, but it felt rushed and it felt undeserved, as I said, because you're not actually saying anything. Like, not every film has to say anything. It does sound a
But
bit
this film
pretentious to
wants
say,
to say
but
something.
this film wants so desperately to. But really, what it is doing is it's just holding the strings. It's not pulling them in any way. It's not opening anything interesting into this debate. It's not contributing in any way.
Yeah.
And as you said about the overuse of acts, I genuinely think part of this film was that actors asked to be in it. Ty West thought, oh, that would be fun to have
I
you
mean,
in.
even Kevin Bacon, who's having fun, just is randomly there.
Yeah,
Like,
because his conclusion just is absolutely like, how is he connected to the father character in any way? That's slightly ambiguous, other than he paid him, I guess. But like, Kevin Bacon is the main antagonist for the first 2 acts of this film, and
right.
he's in that role. He's quite fun. He's clearly having a good time.
But then
Elizabeth,
he's just gone, and there's no mention and absolutely no consequences for anything that he does throughout the entire
yeah,
film.
like Giancarlo Esposito, just he is involved in the conclusion of Kevin Bacon's character, but like that's the last scene that we see of it. There is no payoff to him. I don't know why he was there. Elizabeth Debicki, I don't know why she was there. Yes, it makes
And
sense
there's quite a
narratively to
few of the
get.
sequences with Elizabeth Debicki
Mm,
felt like Ty West was trying to speak to the audience in this meta way that just came across kind of like just so obnoxious and annoying. Like, and he's like, "Oh, I'm trying to make a B film with A ideas." It's like,
mm,
then give me the ideas. Then show me,
yeah,
good sir. Like, I like give me something to latch onto, because again, this wants to be like a B film and have the B horror aesthetic and be like this 80s slasher. But then it doesn't even fully commit to those ideas of its genre. Like, it wants to be camp at points, but then at other points it wants you to treat the camp elements like they're serious. Like,
mm,
it wants to have its cake and eat it too, and then have a second cake, and then have ice cream on the side,
yeah.
and then you try to eat all of it, and then you just vomit it all out, and then it mixes together into nothing.
It's a perfect analogy. Perfect analogy. Couldn't say it better myself. But no, yes, there's so many just disparate ideas that are, and that you just don't know which ones are important. You don't know what to
Yeah,
focus on
and
in this
you don't
film.
by the end either.
And when you get to the conclusion, it's just like, oh, so that was the main strand of the film. You could have highlighted that a bit more. Like, I feel like they want you to be in the psychology of Maxxine, but I never feel
Mhm.
it gets you there. And that's not Mia Goth's performance not being convincing. I think she does well with what she did, but her character is just so underwritten and underserved by the narrative. And the ending really sidelines her too much to an
Yeah,
extent.
and
Like, it
and
sort
it's
of
almost like it wants to
loses track
be
of that.
it's almost like it wants to be like this unreliable narrator, but
Mm.
then the narration becomes a bit too reliable to uphold that. It's again, it sets up this idea and then doesn't commit to it. And
Yeah,
like
her character motivations are really all over the place as well. Like, why doesn't she talk to the
I don't think
police?
he has
She
any.
just she just doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It's all just she is used as a vehicle to get from point A to point B, from
Right.
get to
And I
point
think
to
some of it
sequence A to
it's
sequence.
with those flashbacks where it's just like, oh, so now she's going to have the flashbacks to motivate it, but they only happen when we need to motivate her to go somewhere else. And it all feels very cheap. And again, if you wanted to have that cheap 80s horror aesthetic, sure. But then don't try to pull it together into something more meaningful and commit to the 80s horror aesthetic. Like,
Yeah,
again, I keep on returning to Identity Crisis, but that's really what it feels like. And
yeah,
the first act, I think, is it works in establishing some sort of tone and atmosphere. And again, it is immediately kind of broken and tries to go off and do its own thing. But I think you do get into this like neon infused like 80s LA atmosphere. And then the second act just spins its wheels and goes off on to these other, ideas.
tangents. Yeah,
And then the third act is just a bit dull until the last 5 minutes where it just jolts you awake and you're just like, what the fuck?
yeah,
Like, where did this come from? And it's somewhere in the treads of the spinning wheels.
yeah. It ends up being a shootout at the end. Like,
Yeah.
That's really strange for the slasher film aesthetic, as you say, that they're trying to build, to end with just a shootout
A
with
police
inconsequential
shootout.
characters. Exactly. It
Yeah.
was just like, whoa, what is happening now? Like, nothing on this film signposted that that
And
would
for a
be
film it's trying to be so
removed.
driven by Maxine's character,
Mm,
to then just have her be kind of, yeah, going
yeah.
along for the ride by the end.
I think a key issue with this is that Ty West thought he was onto something with sequences, and he built it around getting from point A to point B, getting from sequence A to sequence B, and he
Right.
thought that the sequences themselves would be more impactful. Like he thought, okay, if I just, the character motivations don't have to be that strong if the sequences that I want,
Yeah.
if these horror moments really work, but they don't. Fundamentally, the film's not very scary. I think that's
No.
a key problem. But it feels like they're trying too hard at points. There's the moment where the gay friend at the video store is killed, and it's done in like parallel editing to her
Yeah.
highlighting lines of the screenplay, and I'm like, I don't know what you're showing with this. I don't know
There's
what you're trying
absolutely
to
no
do.
reason, like,
It's
editing is
just
supposed to, give
exactly.
extra meaning, right? It's taking 2 images, and then on their own, they mean one thing, but then when you put them together, they mean something else. No fucking clue what the extra
It's
meaning is
just
getting.
it's just a flourish that pulls you
Pointless
out of it,
montage.
like the montage it's meant to be scary, the bit that's meant to be the horror, the bit that
Yeah.
because to be honest, like I come into this with predisposed dislike of slasher films. They're just not for me, really, personally.
Yeah.
But even I appreciate that the best part of the slasher films are meant to be the kills. And
Yeah.
like that is what they are vehicles for. Whereas this just doesn't work in any way. I don't think any of them are that memorable, really. And it just loses, like
Because it
it's
wants to be a
as you say.
mystery film too.
Exactly. It has an identity crisis, and it just doesn't commit to being a slasher film
Right.
at all.
And I think where X and Pearl do thrive, they thrive in Mia Goth's performance when you give her center stage and give her time to shine. This does not do that. It constantly is taking her away from the center stage and diverting its attention. The second place where they thrive is through atmosphere and tone. And it builds this strong atmosphere and tone where even if, like most slashers, they aren't necessarily scary and they're very predictable, the horror moments, it still has this kind of unnerving atmosphere and tone, and you know exactly what it's doing. X is playing off of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and this, like southern, gothic feel, and then Pearl is bringing that same sort of gothic, unnerving feel back to like the silent film era and playing off of the 19th and 20s and 30s and the black and white horror and all these types of it, right? It has this very clear idea of what it's trying to accomplish through its atmosphere and tone.
Yeah.
And this does in any way, shape, or form. So it takes the two strengths of the first two films and kind of nulls them.
Yeah, because I mean, as you say, it's trying to be a slasher film, it's trying to be a mystery, and instead what it ends up being is a distilled, simplified version of both, neither of which
Yeah.
completely work. Like the mystery, if you're treating this as a mystery film, oh my god, it's the most simple thing imaginable. Wow, a couple people mentioned that they went to a party in a hill. Oh, I wonder if that'll be important. Oh yeah, that's just the entire answer. Then she goes there, finds
Yeah.
all the answers. Sure, that's mystery wrapped up. Like there's nothing to that aspect. And then as I said, the slasher aspect, it just is sorely underutilized and doesn't really work because there are only like a
This is
couple of
very
kills
flat. Yeah.
anyway. And we find out the killer at the very end, and it's not satisfying at all because this is a random character they introduced.
Yep.
He wasn't in X, was he? Because my memory of X was a little bit hazy going into this.
I don't, but he might have been
Yeah,
for
because I
like a
don't
scene or
remember.
two.
But either way, it is a complete, like, it's not even, they don't even throw out red herrings. It's just, they don't throw out any suggestion of who it will be. And then suddenly it's this person.
It's
And
just
you're
the
like,
guys there. Yeah.
okay, that's good to
Yeah.
know, I
Like
guess.
I think, to point to a great slasher film that I think both of us love, even you, like something like Scream. That
Yeah.
is both a mystery and a slasher, and it executes those ideas really, really well. And it has that fun, reflecting on the 80s and 90s slasher feel. Like it's both that while also reflecting on what that was. And not
Yeah.
that every film has to be as perfect and incredible as Scream. Like I'm also not the biggest slasher fan, but or horror fan in general. It isn't for me. But I do think that Scream is pretty undeniably just an incredibly well-written film. And yeah, like you can be that. You can be the aesthetic while reflecting on the aesthetic and what it meant within cinema and art and all these types of things in a fun, glitzy way. And
Yeah.
Scream isn't the only example of that, but it's just one that I'll throw out. And yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Because I don't know if this film is even trying to be fun. Like a lot of the reason people do like these sort of 80s slasher horror films
yeah,
is that they are camp and they are fun. I don't know if this film even wants you to go there. I don't know the type of tone that the film I don't know the
wanted me to
emotional
feel. Yeah.
resonance exactly. I don't know what the film even is going for, and which makes me think slightly that the film isn't really going for anything. And Ty West made two quite successful films, and then thought, let's make it a trilogy and wrap it up.
Yeah.
But it feels like a first draft. These films were released ridiculously close to one another. To create an entire trilogy in the space of 2 years is, I mean, it takes a lot of hard work. That, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think this was a first draft in many ways that sort of ended up on screen, and I think that is demonstrated by the fact that you've got all these ideas, but there's no consistent through line throughout. There's nothing for you as an audience to get engaged in. There's nothing to follow. There's nothing to find emotional resonance in at all. Yeah, I think it is a very, very flawed film.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many more ways we can say this film is really bad, and very disappointing. But I don't know. What do you feel on rating?
I mean, I was thinking a high 3 going in, but honestly, I don't really think there are any redeeming qualities to this film. Like
Yeah,
outside of, like Ty West, he does kind of create the aesthetic, and as I say, I'll be interested to see what he directs if he's making something that he didn't write, because I do
yeah.
think it is the narrative
I
structuring
do think he's
and
a relatively competent
writing.
director.
Exactly. Like I'd be very interested to see what he does next outside of
Yeah.
this quite, you know, boxed in zone that he put himself in realistically.
Right.
But
Yeah.
still, so I'm going for a 2. I really don't think there's much about
That's
this film
fair.
to really
I'm
get to.
gonna go with a 3 just because I wasn't bored. But
Sure.
yeah, it's yeah, one of the worst films of the year, which is quite
Sure.
unfortunate. Because I think this did have potential to be a very, very fun time, and
Mm.
it just fumbled that in the hardest way imaginable. So a 2 and a 3 from us. Hopefully, hopefully you enjoyed it better if you're still watching. I can't imagine if you like this movie, you would sit through us lambasting it for 15 minutes. But if you did, appreciate you for watching, and I'm glad that you liked it more. I hope I like every
For
movie.
sure.
But unfortunately, that just isn't how life works. So, regardless, thank you everybody for watching. You can follow us on Letterboxd and Twitter in the meantime if that's something that you're interested in. But until next time, stay safe, everybody, and goodbye.